and welcome back to Book and Page. We're on to Chapter 12, Inside Information. Inside what? Inside the Lonely Mountain! Finally! Too bad there's a dragon. But let's start with the summary first. Okay, so Bilbo finally enters the mountain without much help from the dwarves and finds Smaug alive but asleep. He grabs a cup and books it out. Oh, hello there, Beowulf. Didn't think I'd notice. Everybody's noticed. The dwarves are happy about this until Smaug wakes up and tries to kill them. Then they're not so happy. The company survives, hiding in the tunnel, but they lose their ponies and many supplies because they were down at the base camp and not up on the doorstep. So Bilbo heads back into the mountain, banters a little bit with Smaug the Terrible, until he discovers the weakness in Smaug's chest plating. He's got a spot missing. And gets his toes toasted on the way out. Perfect. It's not like you need your feet to walk. The dwarves and the thrush, it should be noted, listen to Bilbo's account of what happened and decide to camp in the tunnel because Smaug knows too much, and they're aware of it. Like they're just like, nope, Smaug figured out a lot of those riddles, huh? Get in the tunnel. While they're in the tunnel, Thorin talks about treasure, specifically the Arkenstone, which he wants to find. And then, at Bilbo's prompting, shuts the door fully, just saving their lives from Smaug, who turns out, for a giant dragon, can move quietly. Good on you, Bilbo, for feeling him in your marrow. Ugh. So, after all this time, Smaug has arrived, and it turns out he's a politician. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So, Bilbo confronts a lot of things in this chapter, hence why we actually have this particular video name. Smaug's just probably the easiest place to start because, one, who doesn't want to talk about the frickin' dragon? And two, Bilbo's confrontation with Smaug is notably that. Like, a really obvious confrontation. Like, these guys aren't supposed to be friends, or new neighbors, or an authority figure, and a person under that authority. Like, no, this is a hobbit and a dragon that wants to eat him. So, interesting way for Bilbo to talk in these moments, because they have to do something here, right? You can't just keep acting like Smaug isn't there. You tried to do that when he was asleep, and you made it worse for yourselves, because apparently Smaug just has such complete count over all his treasure that he knows instantly a cup is missing. Like, I doubt dragons even drink from... Like, why do you care? Well, he cares because he's a rich person who doesn't want to share his wealth. He's very greedy in that way. So... Bilbo, while he is invisible, goes in to talk with Smaug because they don't have a better plan. Literally, there was no plan for dealing with this dragon. Like, just talk with him, I guess. Talking's gotten Bilbo in a lot of tight places. Riddles got him out of the frickin' Gollum's grasp, so let's talk. Talking's good. In fact, talking has solved practically everything. Talking a little bit of, like, violent / non-violent action. For get into Bjorn's house, talk with him. Get into Lake Town, talk with him. Get away from the trolls, make them talk with each other. Until they turn to stone. So, talking's the easy answer. It's just funny to say because you really think this is going to be like a super action-oriented book. there's actually very few moments of action. There's a whole lot of talking. Whole lot of talking. With dragons. And this is actually a really interesting conversation because of the way dragons have of talking. They call it dragon speech here, and it sounds a little like politicians. Like, I'm not at fault, you're at fault. Only the positives here are what I did. None of the negatives. And it's sort of interesting because Smaug has sort of this smarmy way of making you want to talk about yourself when you really shouldn't. So Bilbo gets a hold of himself, but he does make some mistakes. Balin said that's probably normal when talking with a dragon. But there's an interesting dynamic that we actually need to take a look at here, which is to say that Bilbo, to survive this encounter and not give everything away, must talk in riddles. He can't directly talk about anything. Like, yeah, no, we're here to destroy you. Yay. No, like, he's got to step around these things. Just like he has to make up names for himself that step around his own adventures. Barrel Rider. I'm the one who drowns my friends and brings them back up alive. I come from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. Well, bag in the house and the troll bags, which Bilbo never was subjected to. In reading the story, you have these moments, but they're stepping around all of these things. I was chosen for the lucky number. Well, the lucky number's not 14. The unlucky number is 13. But we start seeing even Smaug can get that. But by comparison, while Bilbo can only talk in riddles, Smaug can directly address things, but like the most uncomfortable of things. The things you don't normally talk about are the things that Smaug is going to go to the heart of and be like, we're talking about that. And you can see it with the bigger things, but there's also the smaller moments. The sheer number of times in this chapter that Smaug is mentioned to be able to, like, really strongly smell Bilbo and the dwarves. You don't normally talk about body odor, right? But it's a little taboo. It's rude to be like, man, you stink. I could smell you from all the way over here. That's rude. But Smaug's gonna tell you, like, I can smell you. Also, I could smell those dwarves. I could taste the smell of dwarf on ponies. Like, it's enough to start getting your skin crawling. Not only for the connotation, which is, even if I'm invisible, you can find me, but also for the fact that Smaug is willing to address these taboo subjects. And not just everybody else is. He's very happy to admit that he ate some of the ponies, 6 of them I think, and that he enjoys eating men, and he destroyed Dale and ate a lot of their guys. Ugh. You can't really label it cannibalism, because cannibalism is, well, human definition of cannibalism is a human eating a human. But I guess we could also possibly say a sentient being eating another sentient being. Because in this world, it's probably still cannibalism if a human eats an elf. Or a dwarf. Or a dwarf eats a hobbit. Like, you know what I mean? So, the fact that Smaug is a sentient being eating other sentient beings, we get the vibe of cannibalism, even if, like, it's not a one-to-one comparison. And he's proud of it. He's willing to admit it. Yeah, I'll talk about that. So, he's willing to talk about the uncomfortable things about you. He's willing to talk about the uncomfortable things that he's very proud of about himself. But even worse than that, he's willing to talk about the really uncomfortable things that you think. Like, he is very willing and able to draw on the doubts that Bilbo has buried about the dwarves when it comes to their agreement. Oh, I bet you get 1/14 of the treasure. How are you gonna take it anywhere? Huh? And it's this sudden realization of like, oh my god, I never did any of them think about that? It's a way to break down the trust that Bilbo has through doubt. Sowing that doubt and also bringing that doubt to the forefront of Bilbo's mind. Because maybe he might have thought of things like that, but he pushed it aside because he couldn't focus on that right now. It would destroy everything. Smaug's here to destroy everything, and he's proud of it. So while Bilbo needs to speak in true riddles, he doesn't lie, but he can't address it correctly, Smaug is able to talk about really uncomfortable and undermining facts. And that's what it is. The fact that if you have any distance to go, it's not safe, and the treasure's not likely to make it all the way there, that's a true fact. It might not be a fact you want to address, but it is a fact. And he lets Bilbo draw his own conclusions from that. And now, some of the conclusions Bilbo draws might be false, but that's on Bilbo, arguably. Because Smaug's not saying directly, you know they're not going to give it to you, but he's saying enough to make Bilbo think that, and doing it on purpose. So it's this really weird conversation between someone who can't address anything directly and someone who can address the worst things brutally directly. Like not step around anything. But it's interesting because it ought to be noted that Smaug does become boastful. But he also has the ability to back those boasts up. He has destroyed Dale. He has destroyed the Lonely Mountain. But Bilbo doesn't let himself get steamrolled here. He's really out of his depth, but he's also smart enough to realize the flaws. Not just the flaw in Smaug's diamond waistcoat, as they call it, but Smaug's reception to flattery. And in truth, that's why his last statement about not being able to catch thieves is such a mistake for Bilbo. Because he throws away his advantage in this moment of stepping around everything and flattery. That gets thrown out the window. Smaug's not going to listen to anything he has to say if they ever meet again. And it would have ruined any chances he had of another conversation with Smaug if Smaug had chosen the company over Lake Town, which he doesn't. And it sort of becomes curious. Did Smaug realize that he sort of got outmatched to the point where he went after what is arguably the easier target of Lake Town rather than deal with Bilbo and the rest of the company, who are literally right on his doorstep and in the mountain? Maybe he thought he killed them in bringing that tunnel down. I don't know, but it seems odd that he went for Lake Town when he did. So maybe Smaug is not as smart as we all give him credit for. Don't say that to a dragon, and don't laugh at a live dragon. Good advice. Good advice. But Smaug's not the only one Bilbo ends up confronting in this chapter. We also get the fact that Bilbo ain't gonna take shit from the dwarves either. The start of the chapter is actually Thorin making this big long speech about how Bilbo now needs to do what he actually was hired to do and go into that mountain and we're not coming with you. And, Bilbo's just like... And interestingly, he matches Thorin's highfalutin tone here in responding to it. He's just as long-winded when you actually compare what he actually says. And he gives Thorin such a smackdown, which is like, if you're telling me to go into the mountain, just say it. And he also points out, like, I've been very useful this entire trip. And you might as well acknowledge that. But he is willing to help because he has changed as a person. He's developed on this trip in really positive ways. So he's not going to back down here for himself, as well as for the dwarves. And it's interesting because his recognition that he's grown as a person is then compared and contrasted with a surprisingly brutal passage about the worth of dwarves. I'm just going to read this. Okay. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They had intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it, if he would. But they would all have done their best to get him out of trouble if he had got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures, before they had any particular reason for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous, and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and the company, if you do not expect too much. Oh my god, like, just, no, this is not, Thorin and these dwarves are like the best people ever, like, it's recognized that they have limits. They're not these heroes and warriors. They're business people. But they can be good people. If you don't expect them to be great people. And that's sort of the interesting thing. Again, we have to remember that all of these groups are analogs, parts of us. And while that sounds really brutal, it's something we have to start accepting about ourselves. It takes very extraordinary people to be great people that we will always remember. And unfortunately, the divide between great people we will always remember is hard to tell from tyrannical people that are infamous rather than famous. But a lot more of us can be good people who do the right thing if we lower our expectations. If you don't expect me to cure cancer, I could still sit down and talk with you if you're having a really bad day. I can't go and feed an entire country, but I can pay for your coffee. It's this weird thing where at the moment it sounds like really bad, but if you realize again that you can be a good person if you don't expect the world from somebody, this is the case. They recognize they're asking Bilbo to do something really terrible, but they're willing to try and help them if he needs it, and they're willing to pay him for his services. They're not going to be cheapskates and cheat him out of it. Or at least they don't intend to do that. So again, more of us can be good people because we don't have the capability to be great, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to let that go and just be a good person. Because if you let the fact that you can't be great stop you from being good, that's how this world falls apart. And I think that's what Bilbo recognizes. Like, Bilbo still walks into this mountain because it would be bad for him to turn the dwarves away at this moment because he was expecting too much from them. And I mean, Bilbo does internalize this lesson. When Smaug wakes up and the dwarves start getting uppity at him again, he's very quick to point out that this was expected. He wasn't hired to be a warrior. He was hired to go in and take something to prove the treasure was still there. He was hired as a burglar. And that's just not possible right now. And the dwarves realize that mistake. They apologize to him, which is amazing. Again, Bilbo understands what to expect from them now, which is the ability to say, you don't get to be angry at me for this. This was expected. And the dwarves apologize and become much more polite after that. So it's nice to see the communication happening. And Bilbo knowing now how to confront the dwarves in a positive way and to speak each other's language. Which again it's part of that business thing. Bilbo is now treating this like a business interaction of, I wasn't paid to dragon. But there's one more confrontation that I want to mention. And again, the easiest way to mention it might be to read a passage. It's very shortly after that one about dwarves that I just mentioned, where Bilbo is going into the tunnel, and he's upset at himself, calling himself a fool. And he heads down, and he begins to hear the sound of what is the dragon sleeping. And we get this section. And it was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous thing that had happened afterwards were nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. Bilbo's greatest confrontation, not only in this chapter but in this entire book, is with himself. In this quiet, dark moment, alone. And that gives me hope. Because it is the recognition that every battle you fight with yourself is going to be one of the hardest you do. You are your own worst enemy. And those are the quietest battles. People don't see those battles. They're in the dark. They're late at night when you can't sleep. Or in your head, even on a crowded bus. But Bilbo pushes through. And he overcomes his doubts and his hesitation, his anxiety. The fact that he thinks he's foolish. He pushes through and keeps going. But what gives me hope even more than the fact that Bilbo did that is that Tolkien recognizes that that was the truest battle that Bilbo fought. All the terrible talking with dragons and the war that is to come, that was nothing in comparison to this quiet battle he had with himself in the tunnel. Tolkien recognizes that is a legitimate fight. And some people fight it every day. So, a lot of confrontation, and surprisingly, the hardest one. So if you're fighting that battle today, I'm with you, and Bilbo's with you, and Tolkien's with you. The tunnel might be dark, and you might feel alone. But don't worry, we're all holding hands, ready to grab you. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.